February, March.
In our system, do we keep track of the difference between what you've encumbered versus what you have an actual PO against?
So I keep track what encumbered compared to actual PO?
Right. We have some that we predicting that we're gonna be spending, and some we have to have a physical PO against.
So you have, are you talking about when I do a budget projection?
Yeah.
Well, when I do an internal projection and know that there's things we're going to spend, no, there's not a PO in the system yet. But when I report to you, I tell you what other things I think we're going to spend. What's on the system is the known cost or an estimate. But I don't put things on the system to dummy up the system.
So if you were to run an encumbrance report right now, the system, it would only show what we've actually committed to. It would be less than the figure you would tell us would be what you're considering to be encumbered funds, because they're items that we haven't committed a PO to necessarily, but you know we're going to be expenses that we have to.
This sample of this budget
Right.
projection,
Right.
when last year when we were closer to the end of the year, you didn't see the part where, I was projecting things that I knew were going to happen, but I hadn't encumbered those things. Like, for instance, payroll.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have payroll encumbered. Somebody had to determine what do we think payroll's going to cost us.
Right.
Now, in this report, I'm just showing you straight what's coming out the system. That's why all these match.
Okay. Mike, any other questions?
No, all set.
Dave? You're all set? Yeah, Amy?
I'm still trying to understand the whole budgeting process, and I've got in my mind that we spend the months doing the budget because we want it to reflect our values, and that's why we go line by line. And I'm seeing that, like this guidance counselors, for the account where the money's coming from, for just these transfers, if I'm calculating correctly, it's about $87,476 are coming from guidance counselors, whether it's the schools of career, and then there's the clump that people have been referencing for the high school guidance counselors that totaled $69,000. I'm just concerned because I think that the guidance counselors aren't doing everything that we would like them to be doing, and it's a limitation as far as time and resources, and
I think that's a discussion that we're board to have.
That's less of a discussion from a finance business management perspective. That's really up to the program subcommittee to discuss as far as what we're providing for support services, what we should be putting in the budget to fund those services, and then during budget time, that's when we get that, we get that inserted. Some of the stuff, Amy, is quite frankly just it's visibility that we haven't necessarily looked at before. So if you just look at the 28,242, it's moving from high school to middle school guidance because we took 0.4 of a position and moved it from the high school to the middle school to provide that additional 0.4 capacity in middle school. So that's a staffing transfer.
Right.
Remember, when you place anybody on the salary scale, that placement is in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
So it recognizes years of service. We give each time we hire somebody, a copy of the conditions of employment is given to the union so that they can verify that they've been placed on the appropriate step.
Right.
So that the way we place people is very strictly
and that's not even a concern of mine whatsoever. My concern is more that when we take money out of something and put it somewhere else, whether or not we're taking away from an area that we want there to be additional resources in it. And maybe we're not being clear enough with guidance about what we're looking for. If they've got, I guess it's $59,234 in excess to be transferred out. That's just a comment, I guess.
That excess is there because you hired people less than what you budgeted for. It's just a simple in and out type of thing. It has nothing to do with the board's plan. You had 10 guidance counselors and you still have 10 guidance counselors, but 5 of those people left. You might have picked up $70,000. That's all that is.
Right.
Okay.
As far as managing the budget. That's different than, what are your goals, what do you want to do?
That's,
Thank you.
I mean, just though to add onto that, that is true, and you said that in your memo, and that's true. I do think, though, that some of the board, anyway, would have liked to have, and probably will again, but like to see additional guidance, but there were limitations with what could be done with the budget without going to a higher percent. So it was a level of staffing that that was approved, but I think that's a good suggestion, whoever made it for program, to make some suggestions to bring to the board. Yes.
It's kind of similar to what you're talking about doing with this music position. We're finding money to increase position. We're finding money to take care of the, any kind of supervisor position compared to what the person.
But the
That's
challenge
that's part of managing. the
is,
budget.
but part of the challenge is then, you know, I mean, it's great we're finding money for those things, but I know there was something close that Rich or someone pointed out, and that people went back and looked in the minutes, geometry books, for instance, that were cut. So, I mean, just, there are many needs and many competing needs, facilities, and, you know, I think we all wish all of this could be funded. So hopefully, bonding has some state money for us.
And remember, the budget is an estimate.
Yeah.
There are 18 months, about 18 months between the time we get the budget for the first time and the last dollar is encumbered. So that we're looking, and things vary over time. Situations occur, and, you know, they have to be addressed.
The main thing is, we as a board need to pay attention when we're talking about transfers, that these transfers that are being discussed truly are the priorities for the district. If the board as a whole decided that it was less important to cover temp services, then we should have instructed the finance office to say, you're not gonna have a temp, what are you gonna drop, what are you gonna stop doing? Because you don't have that temp. Because we need that money to hire an additional guidance counselor that we didn't have originally. If that money is you know, money that we didn't have, but this is the priority for the district. That's the discussion the board needs to have. And then with that, you give the direction to the superintendent and to the finance office to say, this is what the board's priorities are, this is where the board wants to see those funds go.
To piggyback on that then, it would be, when we're finding money, where are we finding it?
Correct. Yep. And you know, there should be less of that as the year goes on, to Bob's point earlier. In this first review, you're seeing all the impacts of salary projections that were based last year and the new incoming staff that we brought on for September of this year. We should see less of that in the next budget.
On that subject, could we get a report in September that balances our projections on staffing to what it is going into December?
September might be tough, probably October, right?
I think that what you're saying is that if I list the people that left with their salary and then list the people that hired with their salary, is that the type of report?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. What's the differential between budgeted projection salary and what our actual will be?
I think the first of October would be good. And I think there's one other thing we need to take into account as we look at salaries. We have a number of maternity leaves this year. We need to cover those, and that's going to adversely impact sixth assignments, substitutes. So you might see the cost of special education increase just because that's where a lot of pregnancies are.
Right.
Yep.
And obviously, there's nothing we do about that one.
Another question I'll save for another day, but I want to talk more about budget and income,
Yep.
but not today.
Yeah, no, that should be part of actually our budget conversation going into the next budget. Okay, other questions? I only had one, and that's that we do have, there's two different types of items as I see it, as far as not budgeted or under budgeted. There are those things that you just can't project or can't predict, and those are understandable. If you're pending, you know, I know previously we've had years where, you know, pending transportation funds and the state hadn't approved the budget. You just don't know. And I'm not looking for those. But for some of these, like an under budgeted CAPE membership, like not budgeting for a doctoral stipend for a position that we owe contractually, what steps are we taking now to ensure that when we do the 16-17 budget, we're not missing those items.
Every time someone came to me and said, I screwed up, I said, make sure you write it down, so you plan for that for next year. That's all we can do. Keep notes of things that have been discovered. You know, everybody makes mistakes. I made mistakes developing a budget because I didn't know what that meant. I could develop a budget, but we're also, again, we were dealing with 2 different years, 2 different account structures. Everybody, we moved it out to the people.
Right.
The copy paper, we got one of these, well, you do that. I'm like, well, why am I doing it? I'm not going to use this copy. So some of those procedures I put into place are not written procedures as much as telling the principals, you're in charge of copy paper now. It's your school, you run the copy machine, you know how much copy paper you use. Why did the business manager in the past budget for copy paper? It doesn't even make any sense. That kind of thing. So as I pushed those budgets out to people, and we realized, oh, something got missed, I try to make sure you remember. And I think this year coming in, because I told the department, people to do zero-based budgeting, we're going to need to see some of that. We're going to see some of those. Last year, there was a lot of, budgeted 2,000, with the zero out, we think we still need 2,000. There were things in there that I didn't know what it was for. It was better to budget something than to budget nothing. So I don't know if that answers your question, I did a bit over the top there, but that, usually when we find that there's a mistake, I'm making note of it too, that we can pick it up when we do the budget reviews, and they make note of it because they don't really like to come out.
And remember, this is the second year we've been trying to come, so we
Yeah.
can have that comparison.
Hopefully this year we'll have a better comparison.
Any other questions regarding the content provided by the finance office relative to the transfers?
I just want to say thank you.
All right,
Sorry it took so long.
okay, we got there. All right, so next up would be the overview of non-board accounts.
This is the section of the audit that deals with non-board accounts. In order to give you what you want, we'd like to have some discussion with you about that. I think that, cafeteria has come up. One of the things that we've used some of the extra cafeteria money for is to offset custodial costs, because that's a cost that's generated, the cafeteria generates those costs. And we historically have used that as an offset. And so when you see the report from Charles, it shows that surplus, but it's used in different ways, either A, to buy equipment, or B, to offset the cost of custodial. So what we'd like to do is to have a discussion with you relative to what are you looking for with that report, so that we can provide that for you. You can see the cafeterias in there, we have scholarship funds, all those things. So we're just looking for some guidance.
I think we have to adjust this. This is new, and I don't remember getting this before.
Well, rather than log the full board down at this point with half an hour to read the auditor's comments and then to try to tie it together, I mean, my suggestion would be, finance subcommittee should sit down with the administration, outline what it is that we need to identify as far as what are these accounts, identify the collection of accounts, how we want to stand applicable, have a sample report put together, and then present that to the full board as an option. I just think that's the most efficient way to do it.
At least identify what the discussion points are.
Right, exactly.
I'm sorry?
Or at least identify what the discussion points are.
Right.
I think that rather than prepare a whole bunch of stuff, then have you say, this is not what we're looking for, we'd rather just be able to answer your questions. Because there's a lot of scholarships in here, we need to know what specifically would you be looking for those scholarship accounts, the cafeteria account, there's the student activity accounts, how far do you want to go into those accounts? And those are questions I think that would help us greatly going forward.
I've also, excuse me, I've also had a discussion with the auditor about this. Excuse me. They're going to give us some feedback on what's best to get back to the boards.
Okay, and that's still pending, is the word back?
Isn't that one of our packets, wasn't it?
That's the monthly report that's in your packet. At the previous meeting, there was some suggestions, someone suggested that what does the auditor recommend? And I asked the auditor that question, and he sent the letter that is sent to you.
Right, as far as the collection of reports. All right, so unless anybody objects, I'll instruct the finance subcommittee to work with the administration on what that reporting package should look like for onboard accounts. Okay. All right, thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Okay, it brings us to 6.1, CMT CAP science reports and implementation of NGSS. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Susie. Jack, your call if you want to sit over by the audience to see the presentation, or if you can see it from where you are. It's either way.
I'm Lauren Fearon, the Director of Curriculum, and together with Dr. Cerusi, the middle school principal, and also with us here, Alexa Mitchell, who is the Science Department Chair. We're going to talk to you a little bit about, to begin with, what the CMP and CAP scores were for 2015, but we're also connecting that with the state of Connecticut has just recently adopted the Next Generation Science Standards, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about what that process of moving from our standardized test, being the CMT and CAP, to being a new assessment that's going to come into place in about 3 to 4 years to go along with these new standards, and what that process is going to look like. So I'm going to tell you about what the scores were for the 2015 8th grade CMT science test and the grade 10 CAP test. Dr. Cerusi is going to talk to you about the NGSS and the why of it and what some of those changes are. And then at the end of this, we'll talk to you about what our transition is going to look like as we have our curriculum take these new standards into effect and we get ready for what will be a new assessment a couple of years down the road. So in the spring of 2015, we had 264 of our sophomores took the CAP science test. There are 5 levels of performance on that test, from advanced, gold, proficient, basic, and below basic. In order to make adequate yearly progress, you have to have your students at least proficient. We want them to be in goal, obviously, but as you can see from this, students in general at or above the proficient level, 92% of our sophomores, at or above the goal range, 66%, And there's a chart over the last 3 years. That's what this looks like. The blue column is the most recent one. And you can see that while there's some minor variations from year to year, we pretty much stayed the same. Overall, obviously at 90+%, our students do very well on this test. However, we're gradually putting into place some new curriculum to align with these new standards. Some of the content is different, and as we make that transition forwards, fortunately, so far, we're seeing things look very good, but we may not as some of the content changes as we prepare for a new assessment. So we're going to be, and Dr. Cerisi will talk about this a little bit more, in a position where we are teaching towards a new type of assessment while the students for 3 years will be taking the old assessment. And we can't continue to teach towards an old assessment. We need to be moving towards the new one. For the CMT Science, this was the 8th graders. 276 students took the test. Our in-goal range over 80%, at our proficient again over 90%. So while the chart looks a little bit different, we still have 90% of our students who are scoring where we want them to be. And again, you'll see that while the numbers look a little bit different from year to year, we're more or less the same place. Interesting to have had in 2015, when, as we'll talk about, we've changed our curriculum approach in grade 7 and grade 8 over the last 2 years. We're already putting into effect some of these changes, and while our teachers and we have been concerned that because some of the content pieces don't match up, our emphasis on skills have had what I would say is some payoff in seeing the students perform well. Which takes us into the next generation science standards, the NGSS. Dr. Cerisi is going to talk to you about some of the why of this.
So a couple of years ago, we started the STEM program, and part of starting the STEM program, I ended up getting invited to a state department meeting. They love to gather people up and pull them together. As part of the district area council, the new next generation science standards came out, and they did not want to implement them right away, sort of like Common Core just all of a sudden got thrown at everybody and implemented. They said, we're adopting this, we're going forward with this, X, Y, and Z, and we're going to provide you professional development as you go along. Their idea was to go out and talk to people about what this should look like. Our idea, or I should say the idea at middle school, what we eventually started with, was to take the NGSS standards and make them part of the STEM program initially, and then move them out to all of grade 7 and then all of grade 8. So we sort of got a jump start on this. And when you compare this, you have a really tiny chart in there, and if you want, I think this got sent out electronically too, so you could blow it up, but you can see the comparison between the NGSS standards and math, the Math Common Core and the English Language Arts Common Core. I'm not going to go into all the different areas that they have in common, but the NGSS standards map themselves right specifically to math and to English Language Arts. Every standard is mapped back to that. In the early documents as a reviewer, we got to see the direct correlation between the two. Before they were approved nationally, they went out to a number of institutions across the country for approval. Go forward a little bit. One of the things they discovered was that the AP, it has an influence on AP testing. You'll notice these are all state slides. They provided us with a deck of slides. I wish I had had this 2 years ago. Probably make a little better argument, or support the argument about the STEM program, but AP Science course exams redesigned to reflect knowledge and skills, the integration of both, content, inquiry, reasoning, equally addressed in the new test. So as the AP changed, the NGSS standards, the next generation science standards, were put together to help prepare those students for those types of classes.
This time with the colleges?
Yes, some of them with some colleges. I think it was a National Science Foundation was the original one. Is it an upgrade? I can tell you that looking at this, it is aligned with college and career readiness standards of the other disciplines, jobs that require STEM. And you could read a lot about, everybody's read this in the news, about the push for STEM into the classroom or back into the classrooms, and a big focus on that area. And one of the things that was made clear to us at these meetings was it's not just an upgrade, because we compared the NGSS standards to Connecticut standards in our meetings. There were some big differences. And I know that Lauren is going to talk to a little bit about some of the changes, instructional changes that hopefully, well, actually, you will see over time. We're a little ahead of the game. But one of the couple of charts that they threw up there for us is projected job growth, and just in Connecticut itself, I didn't know we need that many hydrologists, but evidently the profession itself is going to increase by over 20%, up to 24%. They have the average salaries, atmospheric, medical sciences. I mean, these are all jobs that are currently available or open in Connecticut. Associate degrees, they were not left out. And you'll look at job growth along with the projected salaries for each. These, again, are by 2022, the expected increase in each of those areas. And then STEM statistics, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, STEM statistics, so to speak. If you look at the average salaries for engineers versus the average salaries for all other occupations, you notice that there's a differential, which is one of the reasons for pulling in STEM-type activities. Not to lose sight of the fact that we do have students, and we need to be, keep in mind, we need to be well-rounded. Always have to keep that in mind. It's not just one size fits all, which is why, I talk about the Inquiry Academy later. I know that's on the agenda. I'll push a little there. The emphasis on the science standards. Do you want to?
Sure. This is how these tie in with some of the changes we've been looking at making connected with the higher level critical thinking skills that were embedded in the Common Core standards as well. That the emphasis goes to inquiry, it goes to developing ideas, to the application of your knowledge and understanding to real world problems, to novel situations, and moving away from the idea of knowledge recall being where you stop. Knowledge recall is important, it's not that we don't want it, but you can't set the bar there. You have to use the knowledge recall to apply it to a new situation. That's what happens in a real science job. You don't hire people to solve problems you already know the answer to. You hire people to solve problems when you don't know the answer to. So the practice in our science classes, even as early as middle school, needs to be on using your knowledge to solve a problem rather than repeating back instructions that you've already been given. So this is something that the new assessment is also supposed to look for, but you can see the difference between them. Less learning about, more figuring out. And these are just good teaching approaches, not specific just to science, but this has been our focus for professional development and instructional strategies in all of our disciplines over the last 2 years at Rham. So they're developing their own ideas about how to apply these skills to something that is real. One of the cornerstones from the NGSS is the statement, all standards for all students. So rather than the idea that some of these higher level critical thinking skills are only for students in an honors class or an AP level class, those types of skills are for students at all levels. And obviously they will apply them in different ways, but we want all of our students to be working on the thinking and not just on remembering the facts. Do you want to go over some of these?
Yeah. So basically when you look at the current standards, you see the words describe, and provide explanations. Then when you look at the next generation standards, they take it a step further and they say plan and conduct, develop and use evidence to support. Now these are all standards that are also within the Common Core when you look at them as well. But it does represent a shift. And we did plan for this shift. A couple of years ago we started, actually the standards came out on April 15th and April 16th. The group of science teachers at the middle school sat down to look at curriculum adjustment. And then we had added a science department coordinator who has taken over, wonderfully taken over, pushing this not just 7-8, but now 7-12, and has worked really hard at mapping out a course of action for development. But that is the biggest shift, is if you look at, even if you just look at the words in green, it tells you right there. Use evidence to support the explanation that traits can be influenced by the environment. They're picking out specific topics, but they're also asking for evidence. If you remember from Common Core presentations, the big one is cite text evidence. Citing evidence is important. Developing and using models is important. Planning and conducting investigations are important. And they may not come to the right answer. Kids, as a former science teacher, it used to bother me when students ask me, what's the right answer? My question for them is, what answer did you get? And can you support why?
One of the other things that the state gave us was in the course of doing the preparation and consideration across the state for whether or not to adopt the NGSS, the state really had a choice. They could reject it altogether, we could launch out on our own, they could decide to adopt it but modify it, or they could decide to adopt it wholesale, which is what they eventually decided to do about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been relatively recent. But of the people that they presented this to, local board members, stakeholders, and a number of places, pretty much everyone is in agreement that the changes are going to be good for the state.
The only thing I can add is Lauren just stated, they really came at the meeting to 3 decisions. One is if you adopt it wholesale, you get the benefits of working with everybody, but you have to adopt the standards in the format that they are presented to you. You can't change a color, you can't change a word. The minute you change anything, you own the changes, you own developing your own test, which means you have to pay for that test yourself. And as we know, testing can cost quite a bit over the course of a state itself. That was one of the agreements. The majority of us felt that we should just adopt it and move on. Push it forward. It did get adopted November 4th, was finally went to the State Board of Ed for adoption.
But that was a process that was about
2 years.
in
2-year process.
in consideration of it. This was an example of the types of questions that have shown up on the CMT and the CAP versus what they're saying will show up on the new assessment. On the left side, you have what is essentially a knowledge recall question, about plate boundaries of the Earth, and you either know it or you don't. On the right side, while you still have to know those things, it's also asking you to apply it. So drawing a picture to show what's happening that would cause mantles to move apart. It asks for, at the bottom as well, to explain your answers. So a difference between a multiple guess question and one that requires that you explain why you came to the answers that you did, which is part of the same kind of transition that we've seen with the Common Core standards for English and math. This again is another example of that type of thing, asking students not only to identify which would be the best model for showing a particular type of comic composition, but also asking for the explanation for why you chose that model and why the other ones didn't work. And you can see how if the question was just what's the best and you had to pick A, B, or C, you can try to spit that answer back. Once you're asked to explain why you came up with it, it's asking for a deeper level of understanding. So this is the transition model that the state provided as a possibility for how to move over a period of several years from a curriculum based on the Connecticut standards to the curriculum based on the next generation standards. And their basic idea is that for this year, they were imagining that everybody wasn't ready for this change yet, that next year you would begin with a couple of grade levels and a couple of more in 2017, 2018, and then finally the rest of them 2018, 2019. Their estimate for when the test will be prepared is 2018, 2019. If patterns of state ability to create a new test run true to form, it will at least be 2019 and 2020, if not longer than that. So we're proposing our transition to look a little bit different than theirs. To begin with, we've already started with our grade 7 and grade 8 curriculum for the last year was already written based on some of those new standards. We are in the process of writing right now, 2015, 2016. Alexa and several other biology teachers are rewriting the biology curriculum, which is primarily in grade 10. And even though those standards hadn't been adopted yet, we all made the decision that we were going to move forwards as though they would, because we think they're a good idea. We would then propose that for next year, we'd be rewriting the curriculum for grade 9. And then finally, by 18, 19, we would have all of the curriculum for science rewritten to be based on those new standards, which should put us a year or two ahead of the new assessment. Yeah.
And I want to appreciate both of you for all the work that you've done. This is tremendous. I'm just looking at the 9th grade, 2015, 2016. If I'm reading this correctly, I might be wrong, but these kids are going to be involved in the new generation science standards in 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade, and then they're going to go back to state standards for 9th grade? And
Well-
then, am I reading that right?
At the moment, our students right now who are in grade 8 have curriculum that it is based on the next generation standards. Next year, when they come up into grade 9, the curriculum for grade 9 isn't being rewritten at the moment. So the curriculum they're going to come into is the grade 9 curriculum that has existed in the past. And some of that is because while we anticipate some of these changes, we, like the rest of the budget, we make our decisions about what we're going to rewrite several months in advance of it. We made the decision that we were going to be this year rewriting grade 10 for a variety of reasons, and did not make the plan to do grade 9, because as far as we knew, this change might not have taken place this year. It might. And it would, I don't think we're going to have anybody at too much of a disadvantage. At the moment, what's going to continue is the CMT and CAP science exams in place that happen in grade 10. We don't know yet whether the MGSS exams, when they happen in 2019, are going to be for all grades, for grade 3, 8, and 10, or for 3, 8, and 11. So we just want as quickly as possible to get there, and it is something that we'll talk about. The soonest that we could be writing the 9th grade curriculum is for 2017, 2018, because we would have to start writing it next year. We can't write it this year. We've encumbered all of our curriculum budget money, and I'm not sure that even if we decided that we wanted to try to move forward with it sooner than that, whether we have the people, because we have other people currently writing, I'm not sure that we have it. But we could talk about that as something in the program committee if we wanted to try to move ahead quicker. And basically, this discusses this new assessment and what it's going to look like. We won't really know what it looks like until it happens, but our big next step is rewriting the curriculum. So we'll continue to have our emphasis on this inquiry, on applying skills to novel situations, on the application of that learning, and in particular, something that I really want to stress is that it makes teachers understandably nervous that they're going to be teaching to a new set of standards while being tested on an old set of standards. And while we're confident, and we've seen so far, that if we're teaching towards these inquiry-based skills, our students will perform well on any test that they're given. And we don't want to put somebody in a position of saying, how come you didn't do well on this old test, when we're pushing you to teach towards something that hasn't happened yet. So we want to be sure that there is support. Certainly we have the support in place from the administration. I'm certain we'll have it from the board as well, to make sure that everybody in the science department understands that we all know that they are in a transition and that they are in this awkward place. Liz Butner and other people from the state who are presenting this will talk about how it is inherently unfair to be telling people that they have to change towards a new way of being assessed while continuing to assess them in the old way. But that's the system that's going to be
So this is a state level initiative?
This was, the Next Generation of Science are beyond Connecticut, that was,
It's a national consortium.
Is that, how does it tie in with Common Core and SBAC?
well, it ties in the sense that the underlying philosophy is towards less knowledge recall, more application of skill. It was a different group of people. It was a science-based consortium of teachers looking to have national standards, again, rather than the local ones, but nobody was required to adopt them, and the state of Connecticut and all of the various their district representatives, like Reserve is ours, who went to these various meetings to talk about whether the state wanted to adopt this or wanted to continue with their own.
Now would the SBAC pick up this?
It's a separate
It's a separate
entity. Now, who knows? They may at some point try to combine those things together. Unlikely, since the state has said that grade 11 isn't doing the Smarter Balance test. We're using the SATs in Connecticut. But this is the system that the state has agreed they're going to move forward with, and with the creation of a new science assessment.
But just for clarification, historically, science testing and evaluation has been a separate component from the LA and math all along.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know,
But it was-
CAP have not blended them together into one test, so.
It's
No,
five
I
years.
want that, but
But it was done by the same group of people at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, and this is likely to be something that is handled by a different consortium. However, as far as the state is concerned, the state is going to tell school districts, here's your science test, here's your ELA test, here's your math test. And that's what we have. Any questions?
Alexa, I have one for you. As far as the transition that the department is experiencing going into this, you know, we know when moving ELA and math through Common Core, it was all dumped and just this massive flood of things. I mean, this seems a little bit more planned out and logical. Are the faculty feeling comfortable with the pace of transition into NGSS and their ability to, through development, get ready for it?
I would say so. I think it probably depends on who you would ask, because some teachers had to experience the transition much more quickly than others. So some people are kind of, waiting to get really started on using the standards. But as a department, I think that we've had to really reflect on what our teaching will look like as we move forward. So overall, I'd say yes.
And, again, from a board's perspective, it's a little selfish on our part, but any anticipated incremental expenditures that you're going to foresee relative to either PD or curriculum support that the board is going to need to consider in supporting this moving forward?
Curriculum support for sure. I mean, we've already transitioned quite a large chunk of our curriculum, or we're already in progress of that, but we still have a lot to undertake. So, like the 9th grade and the chemistry courses, those are the two big ones that I'm thinking of. And then beyond that, professional development, I would say, would be extremely helpful for our teachers. I think that the state is still sort of figuring out how they're going to provide that to people. So it's not really, there are opportunities, but I'm thinking next year there will be a lot more.
The state is planning, again, it's the state, so we'll see what happens. But their plan is to be providing along the lines of what they did for ELA and math with the Common Core, to be providing through the local RESCs professional development for the teachers.
That would be very helpful, I think.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Carol.
Just a comment. I think, we should support the teachers who have to switch the content to new topics in GSS, but also I think we should also think seriously about support for the students. And I don't know if even you know the full range or implication of what this is, and that's of a concern to me.
Absolutely, I mean, that is, as we make some of those alterations, we absolutely have to be, in the same way that we've had a concern for students as we switch from an approach that has been more teacher-centered into one that is more student-centered. It's something that we talk about within departments and within schools. We're asking students from the time they're in our district, but we've talked with the elementary school principals as well, to do much more in the way of their own initiative and their own problem solving. And that's a change. And there's an initial pushback about that. Well, you're not teaching me if you're telling me what to do, if you're not telling me what to do next. So it is a transition and not something that you just flip a switch.
We have started a dialogue with the elementary schools as well, our sending schools, with the principals, and we've talked about having the curriculum leaders of each of the schools meet as well about the science standards. They're very interested in discussing it with us, so hopefully that something comes of that as well.
Because I can see where for some students it might not be difficult to make the transition, but there are certain students
Absolutely.
with certain ways of learning and learning styles who are going to they're going to freeze up and they're going to need extra help in the course of doing this, and because they've come quite a ways
Yes.
in one way and now
Yes.
they're having to change.
No, absolutely, and it is something that within our professional development for teachers within the various departments, we spent time talking about already with the general ideas that the new standards brought to all disciplines, but now we'll be looking at it specifically with the NJSS as well. But yeah, it is a different way of thinking about what your expectations are. Like I said, you can't just flip the switch. You have to move into it gradually.
And some students may need it
Of
over
course,
time.
yeah. As in our previous discussions in language arts and math over the last couple of years, we had teachers who have said, I understand now we're not just teaching students math or teaching students reading, we really are teaching students how to think. And that's a different way of approaching things, and it takes a while to make that transition.
When you're developing your curriculum, are you doing a lot of interdisciplinary units between like math and science and pulling in language arts, or is everybody kind of just doing their own thing?
Well, the nature of how our curriculum at the moment is written is that it is done individual courses within individual departments. And there's not a lot of cross-pollination. We'd like to see much more of it. Individually, some of the people involved are already doing some of these things, but we don't have a protocol in place yet that says if you're writing curriculum for this discipline, you will make sure that you're connected, especially at the high school level, with others. It's something that we've spent time talking about doing. We actually have in place for our professional development, not this year, but next year, to be putting groups together to do interdisciplinary work and interdisciplinary planning. We were going to put that into place this year. It was part of our PD plan, and there were so many other things that came at us that we felt we had to postpone it. It's something we want to see. The Rham Academy is already planning on doing exactly those things, but we hope that that will eventually become the standard for all of our departments, but we're not at a place where we're requiring that yet.
Do you have goals set up for the teachers that they do a certain number or percentage of them, or start to do that? You know,
I'm sorry.
like, you know, when you're discussing goals for teachers for the next year, is that something that's suggested that they try to do that amongst themselves?
The interdisciplinary
Yeah.
pieces of it,
Yeah.
that's not something we've put into place yet. Again, it is something that the reason it wound up on our initial plan for PD this year was that teachers from different departments had brought it up as something that they wanted to work on. And again, because there were so many other new things coming at us that we had to work on, we moved it away. Sort of like talking about the budget concerns. We want to do everything, but you can't do it all at once. And it is something that's important to us, but that's not where our priority is right now.
Okay.
Other questions?
Any other groups looking to revamp
Oh, are we going to, well, we have the new social studies framework that went into effect last year, which has in fact changed some of the curriculum. And we're currently rewriting our 7th grade curriculum this year based on those new frameworks and talking with people at the 6th grade to make sure we get those pieces together. But that doesn't have its own test. So we don't have quite the same pressure from that. One of the interesting things along those lines with the NGSS is that the standards for middle school are not mapped out by grade. The standards are for a grade 6 through 8, so it becomes up to the districts to decide which things fit where, which is a particular challenge in a district in which we don't have grades 6, 7, and 8 all under the same roof. So it really does require that we have good communication with the elementary schools to make sure that we're having all standards for all students across those 3 grades.
Is that communication working well now, or?
I think so. I think we're in a very good place.
I think that's right now.
The woman who is the teacher who's also now the curriculum specialist for the Hebron elementary schools is part of a community of practice at EastCon that I'm also part of for curriculum directors. So we've had an opportunity to meet and talk a couple of times already, and will again actually this week. So.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, brings us up to item 7, reports, committees. Communication technology, I don't believe has met since our last meeting. Facility safety transportation.
We had several meetings over the last month, presentations by Collier, BSC, from the outside inside. I think the committee did an outstanding job of sitting down and analyzing all the data that was presented and moving it forward to where it is now. So we'll schedule a meeting hopefully in the next couple of weeks, or maybe after the holiday. But I'd like to say thank you to the committee because again, there's a lot of time invested on everybody's behalf. Also say thank you to the towns for attending and providing your input. So I thought it was drinking from a fire hose pretty much, but we got a lot accomplished, and again, I think it's just a pat on the back for everybody, but thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Policy, Dave.
Okay, so we spoke about a number of things. We did not have any public attendance, and I think we're going to be discussing some of those later on.
Section 8.4 versus 8.5, section 8, yep. Okay. Program?
Program hasn't met since because we had our meeting scheduled last Monday, but the special meeting took over, so we didn't have that meeting on Monday. I was just looking because I believe we have a Monday scheduled in December, but I don't know if it's on the 14th. Yeah, it is. It's on Monday the 14th. Is our next meeting.
No, my name is missing from that list.
From the program, just make a note of that.
The last meeting was October 19th.
We reported about the last
On the
meeting.
26th meeting.
So, and then the next meeting scheduled was just last Monday, but that got canceled for the special meeting. Okay.
Okay. Negotiations did not meet, right, Carol? Since the last board meeting?
No, we meet tomorrow night.
Right, okay.
We meet on
6:30.
at 6:30.
Okay. And athletics and extracurriculars?
We had a meeting scheduled for last week, but it coincided with the parent conferences, so we canceled it.
Okay. All right, and then finance audit and insurance has not met, but I will pass on instructions to them that they need to get together regarding the earlier conversation about non-board account reporting, and you can figure that piece out. Facilitators, Dave, Educational Foundation.
We haven't gotten that since the last meeting.
Judy, anything?
I do not have an update.
Okay. CAVE is obviously full swing getting ready for their annual conference in November. Again, all of that data is available on CAVE's website, and if you need any support for that or are looking to attend, contact the Bob's office and we will coordinate it from there.
And people are attending.
What's that?
How many people are attending Friday?
Friday and Saturday. And you can go Saturday only if that's a burden to get away from work. Who here would plan to be there? I know Bob will be.
I was going.
Okay.
At a conference now, so
Okay. Rich, you plan to go?
everyone's taking us time. But this Friday is Saturday.
Yeah, this weekend. Okay, just coordinate with the office regarding that. Okay, thanks. Brings us to the chair's report.
Wait a
Yeah.
minute, so who's going? Rich is going?
Rich was going to go.
You were going, but you were spotted out there.
I'll sell it to you.
No, I'm going. I'm going on my job.
Exactly.
So I'm going.
Different purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, chair's report. Couple of items that I've had the opportunity to touch base with a couple of people on, but need to touch base with the full board. So ordinarily by policy, with the board chair resigning within the last month and then Mike stepping in as interim as the current vice chair, policy would ask us to, at this meeting, elect officers as replacements, and then that elected board chair would be appointing subcommittee members and so forth. Quite honestly, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense when, by policy, we will be voting a new slate of officers next month with the new board coming on board by policy, and to try to do that for 30 days just doesn't make sense. So unless anybody has an objection to that, I'd suggest we just hold off on that. I'm willing to continue to serve as interim chair through December until we have a new slate of officers. Concerns with that? Okay. The combined happy and sad moment for the evening is that after 12 years of incredible service to the district, this is Mike Turner's last meeting officially with us.
Full board meeting.
Mike has been a previous chair of this board. He's been a outstanding representative for the town of Marlboro, and representing both their community needs as well as the needs of the full district. And so with that, Mike, I'd like to present you with a plaque of appreciation.
Congratulations, everybody got reelected. It was a good time to make a break for a lot of reasons, and I think it'd be a good time for a new member to come on board, and I think so we'll be fine. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for your service. I appreciate it. Okay, before I move on to item 8 on the agenda, I do want to offer an opportunity for our student representatives to share any updates that they have as far as what's happening in the hallways.
All right. Sure. So yesterday, Sunday, there was a fundraiser for Mr. Fagan's scholarship. That was like the most recent big thing that we had. Going back to the month before that, one of the things that in fairness here, you probably will talk about better than me, but the football team getting played at Richard Field, I know that both they, as a team, and the community really enjoyed that. I think that was pretty special for them.
The recent Veterans Day activities, for as far as I'm aware, they went off without a hitch, and as usual, they were very informative and gave students a renewed appreciation for our veterans. I'm not too familiar with what happened down in the middle school, but I know up at the high school, the advisory day, when we had a panel of, I believe it was 4 or 5 veterans talking to us, that's always a great experience, hearing their stories, hearing what they have to say to just in general and specifically to us teens, and it went quite well. And going back a little farther, the NEASC visit, because I think we just that also went off quite well. I didn't hear of any, disruptions or anything like that, and I know that I have a few